Hi, this is Mark Soden Jr. I'm here for Santa Ana Noise Fest 13. I'm here with Will Soderberg.
My name is Will Soderberg, and I'm in Des Plaines, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, but I am a native Michigander who's just been in exile for 13 years.
So, all those years ago, what was the sound that you heard that led you to experiment with noise?
I don't know if it was a sound for me. I'm kind of into recording devices. So when I was a young person, I was given this one Christmas, and it's a looping recorder called a Say It Play It by Kenner. And I destroyed one of these early on, and it kind of is near the beginning for me. I also like to mention, I've been thinking about this question because I watched some of the other interviews. For me, noise is tough as a genre. I mean, it's all sound, and you can go back to the futurist, and then you can. I've been doing sound for quite a long time, but in about 2001, it might have been early 2002, I went to a show at a place I think called the Third Street Saloon on Wayne State's campus in Detroit, and I saw at that show the classic lineup of Wolf Eyes, Nautical Almanac, Mirk Puffy, and Mammal. And I had been attending some laptop shows and such, and I was mostly recording at home. But those four projects, by their presentation, by their suitcases full of mangled gear, by their mask, their performance aspect, and by their really bad hair and their welcoming attitude, really turned me on to, I think, what has grown out of or as part of that as noise for me. Because shortly after that, I left my living room recording situation and started performing as 50% beam splitter and solo.
That does sound like a classic show. I mean, wow, what a start. You showed us a piece of gear. Is that a piece of gear that you're going to use for Santa Ana Noise Fest 13, or is there another piece of gear that you might want to show us?
I haven't been able to resuscitate. I do have a collection of Say It Play It's now, but none of them I've been able to get to function because I mean they're late '60s gear. But I do have this device that I recently acquired. I really enjoy working with stuff that I really don't know how to use it. Once I get where I can understand it, uh, I kind of move on because for me, a lot of the work comes out of a place of unknowing and just kind of letting things happen. So this device, the MMXXT Ape, it's shaped to look like a cassette, and it is a synthesizer,
Oh, that's
well, a
brilliant.
handheld synthesizer. So I didn't build this; I purchased it. But yeah, this will probably. I mean, this is just, and I have no clue, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I'll figure out how to make some sounds with it.
What is the noise scene like in your area?
Um, noise scene, that's a tough thing. There's a bunch of venues, but with COVID, it's been pretty tough. Um, Chicago is pretty vital. There's a lot of different types of sounds being made. I think Ryan Dunn's Triangle is a great venue. I think my last live performance was at a place called No Nations, which is very close to Triangle in Wicker Park. There was a venue that was more improv called Slate, but that's closed. But there's a lot of people doing things. It's hard for me to keep up with them. And also, life. I'm caring for three kids right now. I can't honestly get away for that kind of thing. The last venue I was at, I did a 16 channel installation in a park, Humboldt Park's Formal Gardens, on the 23rd of October. And that was an extension of a piece for string quartet, which was extended from research into Marianne Amishay's work, an unrealized commission for the Kronos Quartet that she took 15 grand and never gave them anything. But I've been attending seminars with the Amiche Foundation archives, and they were kind enough to furnish me with some notes. So I got together a really interesting quartet, and we made some noisy string quartet sounds, imagining a timeline where Marian Amiche finished that work. And then the installation is an outgrowth of that.
If you documented that, is that online
Yeah,
somewhere?
it's on Bandcamp. If you go to whiterosenetwork.bandcamp.com, it'll link to, there's been a live document. There was recordings that were done with the quartet. It's called Music to Rewire Your Brain. So that exists, yes. And hopefully some more stuff. There's a nice 16 channel system at Elastic Arts, Stephen Moore, the Chicago Laboratory for Electroacoustic Theater. So I think we're getting away from noise here, though it's pretty noisy,
Well, it's
whatever
venturing
noise
into
is.
experimental.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay. When you perform, how do you prepare for a performance?
That's a tough one, because the nature of my work is I seem to be always migrating from a setup to another setup, and I really am loath to try to keep doing the same thing for very long. So I wait for something to kind of come to me. I'm very particular about my setup in terms of trying to make everything work. People who are around me during setup know that I can be kind of a grumpy bear, that and during teardown. But I try to wait and let some form of influence come upon me. For instance, for the SANF 13, I found this object at a rummage sale, and it has got me going down a rabbit hole of research about a an exporter from Null Island, which I'm trying to determine more about what exactly this object is. It's kind of my great Kunaclaster, if you're familiar with the Glenn Jones, John Fahey album, where he had an object that they worked around. But I'm thinking this will have something to do with it. One of the things about me is I was a video practitioner, and this quarantine stuff, this virtual series of performances has really lent itself to, the kind of work I do, which I love to have visuals. And so uh, there will be that. I also am doing some collaborating with people around me. If you saw my piece at NorCal, I dragooned some children to stab me and videograph me, and we had a fine time. And I thought it made for a different kind of presentation than maybe everybody else was doing. I mean, tons of respect for what everybody's doing, but I'm in a different place. And it was very reflective of where I'm at. And it was a pleasure to, have one young person do a lot of work with clay, and also I've been using a lot of Signal Culture apps. Signal Culture was a successor to the Experimental Television Workshop, a lot of analog television processing, and they've created a series of digital apps that I use a lot. I think if you look at my video from last year's uh, Santa Ana Noise Fest, it was very simple. It was a cheap pair of Chinese video recording sunglasses and my setup, which included little bits and some iOS apps and my 16 channel Behringer recording mixer that I love because it allows me to have 16 tracks of what I just did, and then I can take out everything I hate and try to improve it in post. And then I just process that single camera through a series of apps, and that was a lot of fun. But I didn't use that at all at NorCal, and I'm not sure whether I'll use it now. But you know, um, there's a process, but I'm not sure I can identify it. There's some research that goes on trying to figure out exactly what this is, what its intention is. It appears to be some kind of 20th century puppet device involving cranes. But I've got some folks that are experts at puppetry and they can't identify it. This whole Null Island exports thing appears to be kind of a mysterious source of information or disinformation. And that's where we're heading. We're continuing to do research, and there have been some sources recorded, and the process of putting it together, it'll tell me what it wants to be, I hope. Yeah,
And
I
so,
think signalculture.org, Deborah and Jason Bernagazzi are now in Colorado, so they've moved all the equipment and haven't yet found a space, but they had a really nice series of residencies. I think I did 4 or 5 of them. You go there for, a week plus and just work for a week. And I love residencies, both ones that are pre-created like Ragdale and Lake Forest here. And I've had some, my background's in community media,
mm-hmm,
public access back in the day and such. And as opposed to touring most recently, what I've preferred to do is to go to a town like I think the last one before the pandemic in 2019 was the Fledge in Lansing, Michigan. The Fledge, which you could certainly put their link, thefledge.org, I think, is a community organization based in an old church. A guy named Jerry Norris runs it, and it's radically inclusive. There's a lot of Lansing youth there doing games. There's various artists there. They have a studio there. I went there for a week and invited both people I knew from Lansing from my time in Michigan and people I didn't know. And we workshopped work for several days. And that album is on Bandcamp. It's Fledge Experimental, I think it's called. And it's, work that I wouldn't have thought to create. And I really enjoy that process. I really enjoy the collaboration. I really enjoy kind of breaking down the media as a more do it yourself, participate, break down some of the tech barriers.
mm-hmm.
So not to proselytize, but I'm an old, public access guy, and I like kind of turning the camera around.
Were
There's
you using open reels or were you using U-matics?
I have boxes of U-matics here. That was most of what I was doing, the old fashioned linear editing. I did encounter a reel to reel in high school, but never really used it. But a lot of the huge, large format VHS and then the 3/4 and all the various formats. So, and I have 2 3/4 inch machines here I'm trying to keep alive so I can transfer all my punk rock videos that I did. I did a lot of work with, there was a guy named Michael Love, who's now in Milan, Michigan. He was in Kalamazoo. He had a band called Strange Fruit that had Steve Shelley in it. And then he kept renaming it Abaku Red, Clan X, and he always had a lot of ideas. So there was an interesting art kind of damaged community in Kalamazoo, which is where I went to school for and lived for a number of years. And yeah, all those videos are either on VHS or 3/4. And I'm trying to figure out which of them could go up on YouTube without being problematic.
Yes,
Um,
problematic. Do you have any thoughts on non-linear editing in a digital state as compared to linear editing back in the day with, well, tape?
well, certainly having taught both, uh, the linear editing was such a mechanical operation, and you had to maintain awareness of where your pieces of tape were in your head a lot and try to manage control track and such like that so you didn't do something stupid like assemble edit. And I know we've lost 90% of the people here, but it was easy to break. you know the equipment was very expensive, cameras are very expensive. I would not want to return to those days. As much as I love going to Signal Culture where they have great Dave Jones analog stuff, and I love chroma keying and wobulators and stuff. Those are great. But I have a nonlinear suite that I just built in the last year in the next room, 4K all the way, and the things I can do with that, and being able to, put something in the middle of something and straight. It's like word processing versus typing. Who wants to go? I mean, typewriters are great, Xeroxing is great, but you prefer to word process if you're doing something that you want to manage.
It was a much heavier lift working in the linear realm because of all the things you described, all of the potential pitfalls with your machines, remembering where things were in your head, and and waiting for the pre-roll, waiting for everything to kick in, and yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I love having an edit suite right next door. I mean, I loved Final Cut because I taught it, and then when they went to Final Cut X, that was a tough bridge because it changed so much. Which I understand why they did that, but Apple didn't make their money on Final Cut. They make it off little devices and iPads and such. So that kind of went away. And my job, which had been production hands on more, transition to more of a management. And, if you don't use anything for a few months, then you have to reteach yourself. So I've had to learn Adobe Premiere, and I'm okay on it. I mean, but there are things you can do in the analog realm, like processing the signal, that is very difficult to manage in the digital realm. That's one great thing about Signal Culture, is that they had a whole analog studio where you could run sound into controlling video signals, and then they also had these digital apps that I have on a laptop, and I run things through them, and you can, mess with the signal digitally a whole bunch of different ways.
Thank you very much for your time. This is Mark Soden Jr. with Santa Ana Noise Fest 13. I've been talking with Will Soderberg.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice afternoon, Will.
You too. And the cat was quiet relatively. Where'd he go? He's sleeping.
There you go.
Good boy.